our apologies for that. Um, we will go ahead and begin. This is the second of a multi-faith webinar series that we have done. Last month, in recognition of Death Awareness Month, we talked with Muslim, Christian, and Jewish advocates for that talked about being deaf in their faith community. Today, we, in honor of Blind Awareness Month, we're going to hear from three panelists and they'll have some time for questions and answers at the end. But they are some blind advocates, and so we have, again, a Christian perspective, Islam, Muslim's perspective, and a Jewish perspective. So it has been a it's been a good learning experience for myself. And I want to give some thanks and some shout outs to some people. First of all, the National Federation of the Blind. I'd like to thank them for being able to provide some speakers from different faith traditions. And especially, I would like to thank Patty Chang, who talked with me about making some flyers more accessible, and worked with me. We worked back and forth and trying to get our publicity to be correct and accessible. So that was a great learning experience, and I want to thank Patty for that. I want to thank Muslim. Muslims Understanding Health and Special Education Needs for providing speakers. Fahad Amjad was originally scheduled, and he had to cancel because he lives in Florida, where Hurricane Milton is hitting. And so our thoughts and prayers are with Fahad, and regrettably he couldn't make it, but we do have Abiba Elaine, and also from Musson. So want to thank Musson for pivoting it during this time, and want to give a shout out and a thanks to Rabbi Michael Levy for helping us to get some of the information to other people, and for his advice on being able to make some of the emails accessible as well. It's our belief Finn's belief that we are more alike than different, and all of our faiths bring a distinctive approach and understanding to a person's disability. But the challenges that a disability brings, the joys of overcoming it, and then the joy of finding special people that join us on those journeys. All of those experiences are the same across all faiths. And so we find a common denominator, and we find that we have a lot in common. And so today we'll talk with three advocates from the Christian, Jewish, and Muslim faiths. And our first panelist is Habiba Elaine, excuse me. Habiba is a mother of two children and currently resides in the Chicagoland area. She's a Hispanic revert to Islam and converted when she was 15 years old. She's an advocate for the blind community and has been a part of programs with Musson, an organization serving individuals with disabilities in the Muslim community. We're glad to have you join us, Habiba, and again, thank you for joining us on such a short notice. Stuart
Thank you guys as well.
Oh, good. Stuart Prost has been an active participant in the United Synagogue Youth. He has taught in Bethel synagogues, a Shabbat morning program. He moved to Hampton Roads, Virginia, and was an assistant principal at Portsmouth United Religious School. He joined the Bethel Norfolk congregation. And by the way, they have been a big supporter of the faith inclusion from the very beginning. So we're grateful to Bethel. He's worked in the Bethel Men's Club, organized the distribution of yellow candles for Yom HaShoah. He's was elected vice president for communications and organized a fundraising effort with the Federation of Jewish Men's Club and raised funds for a Braille edition of Lev Shalom prayer book. He has done presentations in Congregation Bethel and services for Blind Equality Achievement Month with members of the National Federation of the Blind. Stewart is the president of the Tidewater chapter of the National Federation of the Blind and has been involved with NFB since 1973. Right now he is the chair of the National Federation for of the Blind in Judaism. And he's a member of the Norfolk Commission for Persons with Disabilities and was elected the chair of that commission in 2021. Stewart, we're glad to have you here, and your bios, all of your bios are amazing, the things that you've accomplished and done. And then we have Linda Mentink. Linda Mentink and her identical twin sister were born in 1956. They were 2.5 months premature. Her twin sister lived 6 days, and Linda spent 51 days in an incubator, which caused her blindness. She lived in Wisconsin until 2004. Then she moved to Nebraska to teach music at Bible Baptist Church in Columbus and assist with the church's music ministry and gave private voice and piano lessons to members who wanted them. You are I'm amazed at how talented you are musically. And so, Linda was raised Lutheran, born again in 1978, was in the United Methodist Church and then became a Baptist. Linda plays piano, organ, and violin and sings in her church mixed choir. She joined the National Federation of the Blind in 1975 and has held many state and local, state and national leadership roles. Linda is the president of the Alumni Association of the Wisconsin School for the Blind and Visually Impaired. She's executive secretary of the Board of Commissioners for the Nebraska Commission for the Blind and Visually Impaired. She's vice president of Friends of NCBVI, and then secretary of the National Federation of the Blind of Nebraska. She's secretary to the NFBN Senior Division and chairman of the NFB Blind Christians Group. Linda, we are happy to have you with us today and to represent the Christian perspective. We know that Linda won't be shown on the screen because of some technical difficulties there, but she will be talking and responding. The moderator for our event, and if you do have questions and answers, put them in the chat or put them in the Q&A box, and we will get to those at the end of our interviews. Rebecca Wolf is our Faith Inclusion Network's Interfaith Engagement and Disability Inclusion Coordinator. She will be our moderator today through our discussions. So Rebecca, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Tom. I'm not sure that I'm able to be seen or not. It is. Well, okay, I'll start for now. Well, thanks again for all of you being here and taking the time. So we're going to have discussion, and I'm going to ask a few questions to the panelists, and then at the end, we'll have a time for general Q&A. So the first question is about inclusion. What services are being offered for inclusion in your own personal and also community experience? And what type of resources are available in your individual faith communities for blind and low vision people? And what type of accommodations are being made that you have seen? And perhaps in the future, what other accommodations could be made? So, would anyone like to start, or should I just call on someone?
If you want, I can go ahead and start if you like.
Sure, thanks, Stuart.
Okay. First of all, in terms of services, the biggest service provider that I'm certainly aware of is JBI International. They provide Braille and audio materials, both liturgic and in general reading. And they are, from what I can tell, the biggest one. There are some others, such as Computer Services for the Blind. I believe they have done some prayer books. The biggest thing is in terms of inclusion, and I would rather use the word inclusion as opposed to accommodation, because what we really want to look at is integration into the synagogue or the church or the mosque or whatever, or whatever, but the idea is that in terms of inclusion, the best thing people can do is that, for example, if you're describing something, you use multimodal, which means you not only show it up on the screen, you also talk about it. And I think it can be done in a very natural and organic way. And the other part is in terms of, making religious activities accessible to people who are blind and low vision. The biggest thing is to make sure, for example, that if somebody doesn't drive, they can get to the activity. And if there are reading materials that they're made in a format that the person can use. And those are the kind of things that we kind of individually advocate for in terms of doing that sort of thing. I think those are the biggest things that you can do. And I think it's just a matter of an attitude. And I think we as blind people need to portray that attitude, which means we need to not only be receiving things, but we need to be giving, and we need to be given the opportunity to give, to participate, to in the case of Jewish leading services, being involved in the activities of the synagogue. That is something I've just always done. I just realized now all of my life is that I've always been involved in the activities of the synagogue, and I want to be an equal participant, and that's the key. So I think those are the kind of things. I want to look at your question for a second, make sure I've covered everything. The resources, accommodations, like I said, and just in general, the accommodations are, don't assume that a blind, we want to teach that, don't assume that a blind person can or cannot do it. The key is to communicate and to ask the question, and we try to educate people. And I think we do it ourselves. And we do it through groups and we do it through presentations, but I think it's a one-on-one. I'll give you an example. For the longest time, we've had the executive director of the synagogue every time I walk by the elevator saying, do you want to take the elevator? No, I'll take the stairs. And it's an education kind of a thing, because it assumes that blind people can't take the stairs. We can walk, thank you very much. On the other hand, there are going to be people who need that elevator, So those are some of the things that I can certainly think of in terms of, accommodating. But again, I think the key word here in my feeling has always been integration. Had one of our state affiliate presidents who's referenced to said he quote wants to be a Jew in the pew. I like that. So that's where I would like to start out from.
Well, thank you, Stuart. I also should say, part of the question is also about how is inclusion part of the worship or study or those type of settings too. So feel free to include that, but I think that's a great start. And would Linda, if you're there, would you like to speak a little bit? And I should say, I it's maybe 3 to 4 minutes for each person to start.
Yes, I'm here, Rebecca.
Thank you.
I
Go right
can't
ahead.
I can't get my camera stuff to work here, so sorry about that. You guys will just have to imagine what I look like, and whatever you imagine will be better. So, um, my experience here in Nebraska, basically I've been a self-advocate most of my life. There came a point when I was, sick of being a doormat and letting people walk all over me, so I started speaking up for what I needed. And when I moved here to Columbus in 2004, there were already 2 blind people here. And we were in the process of using our refreshable Braille display note takers. And so my blind friend who was instrumental in my moving here and I were writing words, madly writing words to songs that I needed for what we call the special numbers file. And that is a file where all the choir music is. And so she was writing words before I came, and then she was dictating and I was writing words. And we built all of our hymnals that we use. We have 3 that we use for church, and now 2 that we use for school, for chapel. And so we were just building hymnals and writing words for a while. And we already had the Bible. We used the King James Version. So we already had the Bible, thanks to one of the companies that makes refreshable Braille displays. They had already put it in electronic format. And so we were able to put those in our units. And so basically, we just kind of did our own groundwork because nobody here really knew anything about what we needed. And so that's kind of what we spent a lot of time doing. I don't know many blind people in Columbus, and so just the fact that there are 3 of us in one church is kind of amazing, actually. As far as resources for Bible study and worship and things, well, I sort of touched on the worship, so we are able to look up the scriptures as the people do. And in our church, people carry their own Bibles. They look up the scripture verses that are referred to in the sermons, and they of course have hymnals. Well, now so do we. In fact, I provided the text copy of all of our hymn books, the 3 hymn books we use for church, to the pastor so that he could enlarge them for a couple people who had vision issues and couldn't see the hymnal with all the music and all that there. So they have text versions thanks to my willingness to provide them. There is also a wonderful resource called Optasia Ministry. It's OPTASIA. Tom Vos, VOS, has a lot of material there for people who want to study the Bible, people who are pastors, clergymen, just a lot of information on his website. And it's downloadable in any format that can be used on a refreshable Braille display, if I can talk. So that is out there. There are also many other organizations who do provide Braille. There's Lutheran Braille Workers. They have a lot of information. They provide the NIV version of the Bible. and other things as well. And so there are resources out there for blind people to use in their worship. I hope I've covered it all.
Those are some very great resources to know about, and maybe later we could compare a little bit to our other speakers to see what kinds of resources could be included or are included. So thank you, Linda, for sharing.
You're welcome.
And Habiba, if you would kindly share a bit about inclusion in the mosque and in your own personal experience.
So, for me, I became Muslim when I was 15. So the one accommodation that really stood out to me was that I had a one-on-one sister that taught me how to pray. And that was really cool. Like, she literally took the time and came to the house and showed me how to pray because I'm the only Muslim in the family. And like, as far as inclusion goes, like in the community or in the mosque, like I noticed that in the mosque there's a little line, and no one really notices it, but this is the mosque I go to in Chicago, and there's a little line, and that line helps me to find the direction of prayer, and that is pretty cool. um and that's something that means a lot to us blind people. And as far as resources go, there's the Mohsen organization, the one volunteer services for conventions, and I really had the opportunity to experience that a few times, because I would not be able to go to any Islamic convention without like any assistance. And back before Mohsen, I was like, I want to go to a convention, but there's no one to help me out. And they also provide Braille Qurans and make the pilgrimage accessible to go to Mecca and stuff like that. So and there's also like WhatsApp. There's a WhatsApp group for Muslims who are visually impaired and with other disabilities. So I think it's really cool that there's awareness now. And I remember back then, like, it was, no one really knew what to do. Like when I went to the mosque, like no one really, I had my cane, and like I would just ask for directions, and like they'll be like, go that way, and they would start like pointing, but I wouldn't know where to go. So, but over the years and with technology and stuff, so we have Braille now, and so um yeah, that's pretty much. I'm really grateful that things are coming a long way, and there's awareness now.
Well, thanks for that. And there's actually another part of the question which I wanted to add, which you might not have heard before. So if you would like to share, are there any ways that you have felt excluded or some challenge that you've encountered in some way in your community?
Oh yes, I felt excluded during dinners, or like they would all get up and get their plate or whatever, and I would be like, everyone would be talking, and not just dinners, but like also like when they would have like events where it's like a workshop and it's discussion, And I would feel, excluded because no one would, um, they'll find their groups, their partners, as sisters, but I would be left out and I wouldn't know where to go, and I would be like, maybe I shouldn't be here, or maybe this isn't for me, but I had a lot to say, or I wanted to share stuff that about a certain topic that they were discussing. And, but I did feel like that was left out.
Hmm. I may follow up on that in the Q&A, but I wanted to give a chance to Stuart or Linda, if you encountered any situations like that.
Well, the thing I thought about was, it was interesting in high school. I mentioned the United Synagogue Youth, and for some reason, people felt like they needed to go out of the way to say, well, you can't read very well and you can't drive. And high school being high school, kids are being kids, and they say things like that. But at the same time, I think that for the most part, the way you approach something like that is to say, hey, look, I want to participate in this. For example, if you have a workshop, if you've been in synagogues, one of the other things that having the book available in an alternative prayer book is really, really important. And I think most of the major movements have really moved to conservative reform, and Orthodox have moved, and Reconstructionists have moved to try to get their prayer books in Braille and other materials. But having those kind of things there, I think when it comes to being excluded, one of the big issues is whether or not blind people can read from the Torah scroll. And interestingly enough, last summer at our national convention, we had Rabbi Lenny Sarko did a presentation where he created a Braille Sefer Torah, which most people think of as being appropriate or that meets the need. But that's an example of it where people feel excluded. So I think I'm talking in a more broad sense. Those are things that you have, and just when you go to a program making materials accessible, it's not always done, and it needs to be done more. So that's in terms of exclusion.
Thank you, Stuart. We can follow up with you also in the Q&A about those. And Linda, would you like to share anything?
Just a couple things. I have noticed here in our church community, oddly enough, where they talk about not being a stumbling block to the blind, because that's what scripture says and all that, is a lot of our people they're in their own little world, and they walk into the church, into the building, and they walk past me, and they don't say hi. At our school picnics, my friend and I are both teachers at the school, and we have an end of the year picnic, and we have a senior dinner for the graduates. Our seniors graduate halfway through the year because we're considered homeschool here in Nebraska, and so they have a dinner where that's their last hurrah kind of sort of thing, and a lot of times, they will sit, my friend and I, across from each other or next to each other, and a lot of times they won't chat with us, the kids. And so it's gotten a little bit better in that the adults will sit with us, the teachers and stuff will sit with us. I've tried to fix that a little bit. I tell the kids at the end of the school year, I say to them, I won't see you kids for 3 months in class, but I said, if I'm standing there and you walk past me at church, please greet me, tell me who you are, because I said I don't get to hear your individual voices because you all sing together in my class. And I said, so please greet me, say hi to me, tell me who you are, so I can ask you about your summer. Are you having a good vacation? And otherwise, I said, I don't know who's walking by, so I can't say good morning. So again, it's self-advocacy. The kids won't think about it unless you bring it to their attention. That's all.
Great. Well, I also just realized as you were talking, I should have given a visual description of myself, I think. So I can do that briefly, or if anyone else wants to do that. Oh, I'm a middle-aged Caucasian woman with brown mid-length hair and glasses and wearing a black shirt. And I don't know if anyone else wants to give a description of themselves or save that for later. But I wanted to go on to the second area that we're discussing, which is outreach. So outside of your faith community, the church or the mosque or the synagogue, how is your faith reaching out to people with blindness or low vision? What is the approach, or is there any approach? For example, educational programs or social groups or support for families, for example. Stuart, would you like to start?
In terms of reaching out, there are a couple of things that come to mind. One is, several years ago, there was an organization called CAGE, which was basically a Jewish education group. And as you saw, I used to be involved with a religious school, and we went to their conference in what was it, Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina, and they, interestingly enough, had a program that talked about working with blind children. So that was something that they put together. And my wife and I ended up providing some of the equipment to show for it, which that's one example. The other thing is that I want to share is that the combination of the Federation of Jewish Men's Clubs and the this is within the conservative Jewish movement. They put, and the Women's League, or the sisterhoods, put together a whole series of manuals about diversity and inclusion and equity and inclusion, DEI. And they had, one of the things they said that that each synagogue should have a Braille prayer book and a Braille Chumash, which is where you read the sections of the first 5 books of Moses, the Torah, which is done each week in the synagogue. See, everything in the synagogue is very much in the book. You don't have a lot of overheads or things like that, mostly, and generally not. So everything's in the book, but it said, and you need to be, and it talked about how to properly, walk with people. And also, I did a presentation for the DEI group within the Federation of Jewish Men's Club. And for example, one of the questions was, well, should there be a buddy? And my reaction was, no, there should be a special person assigned. The answer is no, you should be just, making friends. That was one thing. That's some of the outreach that has come to mind as being some of the more recent things that I've seen. In terms of outreach to blind people, the things that come to my mind are the activities of, I know, like I mentioned earlier, JBI International. Also, the group that I chair, the NFB in Judaism, we're trying to reach out to other blind people who happen to be Jewish. And we meet live in person once a year in the National Convention. And we've been meeting several times during the year with Zoom meetings. And also the American Council of the Blind, ACB, has a group. I know Lynn, I think it's Corral is on the webinar, and I think they meet more frequently than the NFB group does. Also, so we're trying to do outreach. The other thing that we've been doing within the Federation, National Federation of the Blind, is actually looking to make sure that people are aware of how to reach out to Jewish people, how to make NFB activities more friendly to people who are particularly observant, who are observant Jews. And we have and again, that comes back to that whole thing about diversity and equity and inclusion. We have a DEI calendar, and one of the things it has in there, it has all the Jewish holidays, and the big Jewish holidays, like for example, Rosh Hashanah and Passover and Sukkot, which are major holidays in the Jewish calendar, are considered blackout dates when you're supposed to not have meetings. Those are the kind of things we're doing. Also, in 2022, I produced an article for the Braille Monitor, the national magazine, that deals with reaching out to Jews. Another group I want to point out to is within the Orthodox community is a lady by the name of Rachel Bodek, who leads a group of Orthodox, mostly women, who happen to be blind, and they're talking about children and reaching to a group that is harder for some of the more secular groups to reach out to. So those are some of the examples of outreach that I have seen. And in terms of family support, that is something that the NFB does. We have a parents division, and I think the ACB probably has something similar. So those are kind of some of the things that I'm aware of in terms of outreach to blind and people who are low vision.
Well, it's great to know that all these groups and resources exist, and especially even within, different movements of Judaism. I find that very interesting, and I would like to learn more. And Linda, I also, could you remind us of what type of Christian background you have again?
Yeah, I was raised Lutheran. For a while I was United Methodist, and then I became a Baptist, and I've been Baptist for probably 40 years or so.
Okay, so if you want to share about outreach from any of those, community perspectives.
Sure. A couple things. In my immediate situation, as I said already, I don't know too many blind people in Columbus. We had a chapter of the National Federation of the Blind here, a local chapter, and we ended up being mostly seniors in the end, because some of our people moved away, a couple of them passed away, a couple of them lost interest. They were, doing other things. And we still meet together once a month for lunch, just to keep in touch with each other. One of the things that I do is I encourage them, and I will do it when we meet in a couple of weeks, a week and a half or so, to encourage them to vote. I think it's very important that blind people vote, and we can every polling place has a voting machine that's accessible to blind people. Not only that, but sighted people are encouraged to use it as well. It's electronic. Nobody will, play with your ballot before they do the appropriate thing with it. So whatever you put on the ballot is your vote. And so I will remind the people that I'm with to go and vote. The other thing is, about a month and a half ago, I found out that in one of the Catholic schools here in town, there is a sixth grader who's learning music, and her teacher contacted me once she found out about there being a music person in the area. And so I've been chatting with the teacher via email and phone once about, the Braille music code. So the teacher's learning the Braille music code so that she can teach it to this girl, because they're going to be doing lots of choir music. And yes, she can learn it by ear, but if she learns the Braille music code, that will help her later on in her life. And so I sort of encouraged them to work on that. And I called her mom, and because I'd like to meet this gal, she wants to meet me. However, her mother has not called me back yet. So that's been a little immediate, like right now, outreach that I've had, not necessarily faith related, but in a way, because she's in a parochial school just as we are. And so I know I might be helping along those lines. I think the most important thing, when I was in Janesville, there was something really disturbing that happened. There was a church there that decided they were going to have, I can't remember, I'm a little foggy on it. I can't remember for sure if it was, I think it was just a section in the church where they would put the disabled people. Not exactly inclusive. And it wasn't my church, so I didn't make a big stink about it. Actually, the church I was involved in knew better. Um, but that kind of thing is not necessary. And I think, I hope they don't do it anymore. I haven't heard because I've been away for 20 years, but you know, that that just, we don't want to be segregated as disabled people, as blind people. We want to be included, and the three of us in our church are, and it's great. So I don't know if that answers your question, Rebecca, but that's what I have.
Yes, and I can also save this for the Q&A, but part of this question is about, are there any educational programs like within the churches or the synagogues or the mosques, like to teach people or to, make people more aware? So yeah, that's also part of it. I can hand it to Habiba, and then if Stuart or Linda, if you have other things to add, no problem. So yes, Habiba, if you could speak about outreach.
So, as far as outreach goes, I do have, there's this WhatsApp group for Muslims who are visually impaired, and there's also um, um, another app called Vorail, and that, where you can talk to people by voice, and you can communicate, and there's a few Muslims in there. So, like we interact and we know what we're talking about because I call it the sighted world. Like they don't know, our daily living and what we're talking about, like what happens to us and, daily, day to day. And, it's in the sighted world, like they're like, what are you talking about? And for example, like for me, if I take an Uber, sometimes they'll cancel on me if I put when I tell them that I'm blind and I need assistance. They'll cancel on me, and I ask them these questions, and they're like, yeah, we had the same problem, or so. And also Mohsen's another organization. They I mentioned them before. They really help families with people with kids who are disabled, and they help um, families in general who have disabilities and provide Braille Qurans and that. So I've gone to their events, and their stories are amazing about how they helped families with kids with disabilities. And so and as far as education goes, like, I think at the mosques there are, like the one I go to, MEC, they're like, there's a brother in there with a wheelchair, and they don't exclude him from like prayers or stuff. So, it's like I said, disability is becoming more and more, like people are becoming more aware of it. And when I go to the mosque, like they already know who I am, and they'll greet me. And if it's someone new, they'll say like, um are you blind? And I'll be like, yeah. So, and I encourage other Muslim blind people to um, not be shy of their faith and that we have rights as well. And, you know, uh, I'm sorry that, you know, with Linda's church, I hope they didn't do it, but excluding the disabled, that I don't think that that's fair because we have feelings too. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, I know Mohsen is doing wonderful outreach. And could you repeat again the names of the other the apps and the other ones you mentioned?
So there's the WhatsApp group, Muslims for blind Muslims and low vision. And then there's Vorail, Vorail, and that is one where you can talk by voice.
Hmm. And that's a general one.
Yes, but there are some Muslims in there.
Hmm. And did you say decided something? Was that another one? Or maybe I misheard
Um,
you. Or something
n-
about forgetting rides and
oh no, I said that in Vorail, this app, like, you know, we all was, as far as me, I call it because we have contact with the sighted world. That's what we call, like, you know, people who are sighted because they don't understand, you know, our day-to-day problems. So we can post stuff on Vorail about things like how I told you about the Uber, how if I call an Uber sometimes and I type in that I'm blind and I need assistance, they'll cancel on me. So, you know, if you need someone, if you're blind and you need someone to talk to that will understand where you're coming from, then, you know, Vorail is the right like app because, you know, they're all blind and they'll understand you. And, you know, what as far as the sighted world or the people that can see, they'll be like, what are you talking about? Like canceling and, you know, or let's say that you have you know, you tripped over something with your cane or, you know, people who can see, they'll be like, well, what do you know, they wouldn't understand. That's all I was trying to say.
Mhm. Sorry if I misheard. I understand. And I'll just give Linda or Stuart a chance if you want to add about any educational programs. And now that Habiba has mentioned about the technological outreach or aspect, like any social media groups or virtual support groups or things like that.
Yeah, I'll go. I'm not really on social media. Um, I don't choose to be and have never been really interested. Um, but in our blind Christians group, I haven't, because of my other obligations, been able to get uh, meetings scheduled, you know, between conventions. We're a fairly new group. We used to be a division of the NFB, and then last year we became a group. So I took over after the passing of the chairman, and so I'm working more on outreach to blind people all around the nation, and so we do have an NFB list serve, but you don't have to be an NFB member to be on it. It's called Faith Talk. Um, and there are many faiths represented there. And so, like I sent the information about this meeting to them, and I think there may be a few people from that group there. Also, the Blind Christians group, I have a list of about 57, 58 people, well, 58 with me, who expressed interest in being on the group list, and they for sure find out about things that are going on and will be on our Zoom calls if we ever get them started, which I hope to. And so we do educate in that way. And I just want to say about Uber, we don't have Uber as far as I know in Columbus here, but they do give blind people a hard time, and the National Federation of the Blind is working on that. There's a rideshare rally that's happening in San Francisco on the 15th of this month. And I believe it's Uber and Lyft, and it's mostly um, concerning people with guide dogs who a lot of drivers have issues with letting dogs into their car. So they're the National Federation of the Blind Representatives are going to be there to talk to these companies because they should not be denying blind people rides for any reason. So just so you all know that. I think that's it.
Great. Well, I hope you'll let us know later if you start your Zoom groups or, other groups again so that people can join them.
Yep, will do.
Stuart, would you like to add anything about?
Well, I think
Yes.
in terms of, our group hasn't done a lot of social media, although the NFB has a lot of social media outlets. I know JBI definitely has, Jewish Braille, JBI International has, I've seen, has Facebook and other social media presence. And I want to emphasize about that, the Uber thing. I would really urge that if anyone is experiencing these issues, they number one need to report it to Uber. They also need to report it to the national office because I think our organization is trying to keep track of all of that. That is simply not acceptable. Oh yeah, the other one is to give the driver a low rating because that causes things. And if you think you're at risk, you can also call the safety, the number they have. So I would urge any, I mean, that you don't take that. I can tell you, we had the experience, my wife and I where I think the driver actually came up to us and said, and looked and then claimed we weren't wearing a mask. This was during the pandemic. I contacted, and this was Lyft. I contacted Lyft and they were like, well, you have a high rating, we believe you. And they didn't, that was considered, but you've got to advocate for yourself. But I think the NFB has taken this very strongly in resolutions, and I want to emphasize that. The other thing is there's a group called Chabad, which is the Hasidic movement. They also have a website, and I apologize, I don't remember the name. Something for Torah, the number 4 and the word Torah in it. And they do a lot of, put a lot of activities together. So there's another outreach group.
Is that specifically for blind or just in general, that one?
Blind, that's specifically for blind. And I apologize, I don't remember the name of it.
Oh, that sounds like a great resource.
Yeah.
Maybe we can share it later if
Mhm.
you can find it later on. Well, I think we should go on to our final topic, which is a very important topic, which is collaboration. And the question is, what are some ways that all of our faiths can collectively collaborate? And what opportunities could we create for multi-faith collaboration and meeting the needs of inclusion for our communities and the larger community? Would anyone like to start with this important question?
I will start.
I'll start. Okay, go.
You go, Linda.
We both said it together. Figure that out. Well, I just have a couple thoughts. I have heard over the years, and that was one of the reasons we started the Communities of Faith division way back in 1998, is that some church leadership didn't want blind people in their congregations. Now that just amazes me because it's right there in the word. Like I said, do not put a stumbling block before the blind. And there's another scripture that says, do not forsake the fellowshipping with one another. And anybody that, reads their Bible ought to be obeying it. And so that kind of thing, one of the reasons we created the division and the listserv was to help people with that issue, get materials in Braille, find rides. A lot of people have trouble And I think it's worse now than it was then because a lot of churches have closed since COVID, et cetera. But it's a lot of blind people have trouble getting transportation to and from worship services, and people don't want to come pick them up. And one of the things, I don't have that issue here because Columbus isn't that big, and our church people, there are people in my neighborhood that just come across the road and pick me up, or I walk across over there, and so we work it out. But other blind people, they don't have the contacts we do, and so I encourage them, if somebody gives you a ride, offer to pay them, give them money for gas, or offer to take them to lunch, or offer to, don't just leech off of people, because they won't want to help you out. Then that gets old pretty quick if they're always giving and you're always taking. So, there are things like that that I think we need to, be aware of and be considerate of those who do help us out and do pick us up. And I think that's one thing that we can do in the faith communities, and because we are caring individuals and we care about other people. I don't know of any opportunities for multi-faith collaboration, except for our listserv, and that's a pretty active list at times, and other times not so much. So thank you.
Linda, you said before it was a multi-faith group and then it separated into different groups?
No, the list still exists. We decided that we didn't need to disband that list. So there is a list where people of all faiths are. Like I say, it's not that active. Every once in a while, somebody will bring up a topic, and then it'll be busy for a day or two or three, and then it'll calm down. Yeah, so.
That is that an email list?
It's an email list. Yeah, it's faith-talk, well, dash, but I'm from the old school, so it's faith-talk at nfbnet.org. And if you go on the NFB website, somewhere on there are all the listservs. So there's
Excellent.
varying interest groups and different things. So yeah.
Right. I saw there's a lot of different groups
Yep.
within NFB,
Yes, there are.
including Jewish, Christian, Muslim, and a whole host of others.
Oh yeah, music and performance and lawyers. Yep. All kinds of stuff.
Great. Well, Stuart, would you like to share any
Well, I want to
ideas?
add that the real key to all of this is that there are common issues in terms of faith groups, but I think it's an attitudinal issue. It's not just and I think Linda talked about it very, very, very well. What we're really looking for as people who are blind or have low vision is we want to be treated equally. We want to be part of the community. And yeah, maybe I can't get to the synagogue because I don't drive. Now, fortunately, I happen to live, at least for now, where I can walk to the synagogue. And in fact, in an observant communities, that's what people do on the Sabbath and high holidays, is they will walk. They do not drive. But what it is that, okay, if you need a ride, but also you're there because you're contributing in some way. We want to be helping with an activity. We want to be singing in the choir, leading services, sitting on the governing body of whatever the organization is. We want to be all a part of that. And but that's universal among all the groups, whatever that means. It is quite universal, but what it really comes down to is getting an attitude. I was talking earlier about how, for example, my wife and I went to a commemoration for the October 7th event, and we had at least a couple of people because we came in early. we were standing there. Most people were standing, except for the speakers, and there were a few chairs. We had two people who came up to us and said, well, do you want to sit down? It's like, no, we don't need to sit down. But that's kind of, the attitude of it. And people, we want to be part of it. The other example I use is there was a lady that both my wife and I know who was in the choir in a church, and at her funeral, it talked about all the people that said how they helped this person out, and how this person helped them with their singing, and they were all part of the crew that got that person to church. So I think it's got to be, the whole idea is we want to be equal. We want to be part of the group. We don't want to be off somewhere else, or we don't want to be the subject of charity. We don't want stumbling blocks, like Linda said. But what we really want is we want to be able to contribute and to actively participate in whatever activity we want to participate in, I guess is the best way to put it, whatever that may be, and however that comes out, and however it works within any faith group. I think that's where we collaborate, but that's where I think the NFB in particular helps in terms of building people up, supporting all of us in whatever we do as blind people. Our motto is living the life we want. So I think that's where it is. And I think, there are other groups who do that as well, but that's really where the key is in terms of collaboration between the groups. Also, one more thing about the listservs. The listservs are open to anybody. The website is www.nfbnet.org, and you just go down to the different listservs, and they're alphabetical, I guess. And you can sign up. I think it's open to anyone who wants to join. For example, we have in the NFB in Judaism, we're a bit international in that we have a couple of people from Israel, and we have one person from South Africa who participates regularly on the list. So, thank you.
Well, thank you for your insights. So there are a lot of similarities across the faith traditions, even though some of the beliefs or traditions might be different. Habiba, would you like to speak a little about multi-faith collaboration or the possibilities of that?
Well, so there is this, the mosque I go to in Morton Grove, Illinois, they have these interfaith groups. So I think that this would be, I haven't seen any blind sisters or brothers in the mosque except for me, but I think if there were more, then that would be a great opportunity to bring them in somehow, and that would be, I think that, with this interfaith thing that they do from different religions, and, I think that if they reach out and like have other blind people, Christians or Jews, then, they could come, and that would be a great opportunity to collaborate and know that, it's all about, independence and learning how to speak for ourselves. And because there are some people that may be shy, or I could be shy at points and stuff. So yeah. And I also forgot to mention there is another organization that does Braille Qurans. It's called Islam by Touch. I just remembered because I had gotten a Quran from them as well.
Yes, we've just heard about them recently. And could you just very briefly say what the interfaith group actually does that you mentioned? Or who is part
Oh,
of it?
they talk with other, they go to different churches and promote Islam and stuff like that. And then there's some Jews that come to our mosque and stuff, and it's pretty cool. So I'm sure if there was other blind people, if they could reach out somehow and find other people with disabilities, I think that there would be a great opportunity for faiths to collaborate and know about, independence and speaking for ourselves and what's needed and accommodations and stuff like that.
Right. That's what we had in mind for this type of a panel, even it's virtual or whether it's in person, but that's the idea, to get the discussions and the collaboration in people's minds, and also try to bridge some of the differences or similarities. So that was a great discussion that we had so far, and now we're going to have time for questions, and Tom is going to collect the questions and share with us.
Okay, yeah, thank you all of you for your contributions to this discussion, and for sharing your personal experiences. I'll start off. Of course, the Faith Inclusion Network, and there are a few other organizations that are interfaith. And I know that on this call, we have some, I've just learned that there's some rabbis that have done some excellent work in this area as far as outreach and inclusion of people who are blind or low vision. I do know that, I'll get to my question in just a second. I do know that there's some churches that I've talked to that don't know a lot, don't have a lot of resources about blindness and how to include. So I guess my question is are you aware of any type of interfaith toolkit, so to speak, that a faith community could use to become more sensitized? And Stuart, you were talking about what you want out of a congregation. Would there be any type of document or a toolkit that could inform our faith communities about some of the needs that you have as etiquette, some of the needs that you might have as a blind person, and to better include people with who are blind into different congregations? Or might that be a possibility?
I think that what you're asking about is something that I'm not aware of anything that is truly interfaith. I'm wondering if Finn might be a mechanism for doing that. And by the way, just as a little bit of history, the Faith Inclusion Network actually started here in Norfolk. Your founder, Karen Jackson, was from here, and it was based here in Norfolk and has now gone national. But I'm not aware of anything that's interfaith. What I was describing was specifically for the conservative movement, and it was developed as part of a DEI effort. But I think that is something that, in terms of interfaith, might not be a bad idea. And I think there are some basic ideas, like, little things like, no, you don't have to talk up to a blind person. I don't know how many people have experienced that, where they all want to talk louder to you. It's like, no, ears work fine, thank you very much. Or having, how do you go about, and the other one is, the big one is, how do you walk with a blind person? Many people want to go and push you, and they want to reach out and touch you. And then, particularly these days, you don't want to be doing things like that, because you get yourself in trouble sometimes for doing that, male and female in particular, or anybody else for that matter. But those are examples of things which are, and maybe Finn can be doing something like that. That might be a good thing to consider.
Yeah, I'm not aware of anything either. It's just stuff that we talk about a lot. I mean, one of my things is, don't talk to my friend, talk to me. I can tell you whether I want a cup of coffee or not. Hospital, man, facilities like hospitals and stuff are really bad about that sort of thing. They're just clueless. It's amazing.
Okay. Yeah, I think that would be something Finn would be. We're actually working on some interfaith things for service providers. And so this could be, I think we could work with some of the National Federation for the Blind and others to to come up with some document that could be of help to synagogues, mosques, churches, what, and just have some type of instruction or information. Rebecca has a question. What would you like people to say or do when you're in the church, the mosque, or the synagogue?
I think what Linda said earlier, which was to say hello. How are you doing? What's going on? All the common questions you'd ask anybody else. And just treat you like anybody, anybody else. I think that's the basic thing is you want to be sharing the same things that everybody else wants to be sharing.
Okay.
Yep.
Good. Any other thoughts there?
Well, I think also, introduce yourself, um, you know, allow us to interact with you. We, the only thing wrong with blind people is we can't see very well, if at all. And with many of us, the rest of our faculties are all there. So, we don't maybe stand out as much, except for the fact that we can't see well or we can't see at all. But we still have feelings. We still want to be a part of the group. I had a friend who, she was from the Philippines, and she said that the reason she joined the church in Janesville that I was in was because she saw that they allowed me to participate as a blind person in the music ministry and in other, I was on the prayer chain. I was chairman of the prayer chain. They allowed me to be included in the leadership and in the ministries of the church, and that really spoke to her, something that was important. So I think, just treating us like normal, human beings. God made us all, and so, for people not to be afraid. Blindness isn't contagious. Nobody's going to get it by interacting with us.
Good point, Linda. Good point. One thing you just kind of touched on that I think is important is the visibility and of blind people in leadership and in worship and in church or faith community leadership roles. I think it's important. It's important for congregations and people to see that. We have one other question here. How do blind, and this is for Stuart, how do blind people read from the Torah?
Well, as I stated earlier, most blind people don't read from the Torah because that's not something, except that, as I mentioned before, Rabbi Lenny Sarka, who I see is here this afternoon, has created a Braille Sefer Torah, which is a parchment scroll that, instead of having print, has Braille on it. So a lot of people don't. But it still doesn't mean that you can't have a honor from the Torah. They call it aliyah. What? And the second question, and the thing about it is, so that's something that has eluded blind people, but it doesn't mean that blind people can't lead services, can't read other parts of the service and participate in services, be in the choir, And then also people are learning, can learn the trope as to how to do Torah readings, and then trope is the musical notes. It is done as a chant, and you can learn services, and that can be done auditorily. I'll give you a personal example. When I went through school, when I was going to be bar mitzvah, I think my synagogue took the appropriate approach to this. They said that and you're supposed to, and that included doing a Torah reading. And I do have some vision. But really what happens is you actually end up really memorizing it, but still let me do it. But what they also said is they based what part of the service you led based on your singing ability as opposed to how much you can see. And I guess they thought I had singing ability because I got the most of it. But the thing about it was that they went around to say, well, how can we make this work? And we're talking back a ways to the 1970s. Or I'm sorry, late 60s, actually, 1968. And the technology at that time, they taught people how to do the singing of the service for the various readings through using records, vinyl records, which are becoming more in fashion nowadays. And I actually had a reel-to-reel tape recorder that I was able to put on. But that was how that all worked. So that's an example. And the end result was I did the whole thing. Now, they could have said, oh, gosh, you're blind. We can get you off real easily, but they didn't, fortunately. And my parents didn't allow it to happen, which was fortunate. But that's the other thing we got to do is to get people who are going to do that. That's a long answer. That's a long answer to the short question about reading from the Torah. That is a real issue. But there are a lot of things that blind people can do in the service and should do if that's what they want. That's what an individual wants to do. Did I answer your question?
I think so. I think so. Thank you, Stuart. There's a post by Tasnim Al-Shuli. He is with the National Federation of the Blind and in charge of the Muslims group. It's fairly long, but I'll try to talk a little bit about it. But they have a listserv on the NFB website, and you can email him at nfbmuslims@gmail.com. He's been active with local Muslim communities in NFB and establishing resources in a community within blind Muslims. And they've been focusing on Braille literacy and offering Arabic Quran Braille classes and community as well as community involvement. And their strength is collaboration and community building, which I felt like that was an important thing Habiba was talking about is to be able to be part of a community that understands some of the challenges and all. So I encourage you to check out the Muslims group on the National Federation of the Blind, and that sounds like some good work is being done there. We have one more question from Andrew. He says, my tradition of Christian Episcopal relies heavily on our Book of Common Prayer and hymnal. We often realize that there are prayers or hymns which use blindness as a pejorative metaphor for ignorance. I was blind and now I see, etc. Is this something that other folks have experienced in your traditions? And how have your communities engaged with these issues?
I'll address that, Tom.
Okay.
That particular phrase in Amazing Grace is talking about spiritual blindness. It's talking about the blindness of not knowing Christ until you realize of his grace. So that that particular hymn, it was blind but now I see, means that I was spiritually blind but now my spiritual eyes are open and I know the Lord as my Savior. So that's what that is. Yeah, the use of blindness as a pejorative, all you need to do is speak the truth about it, and think about the blindness as a spiritual issue more than a physical blindness. I hope that helps you, Andrew.
Okay. Habiba or Stuart, anything you want to add?
I think there's a similar approach. There is in the Torah in the book of Genesis, there's the situation where uh, Isaac was old, and then one of the things they said that he was not seeing well. And one of the things that happens to me a lot is that people come to me, well, do you want to talk about that? And again, I think the commentaries that have come through, because apparently there was a deception going on between Jacob and Esau as to who was going to get the blessing from Isaac. And there is actually commentary which says he knew exactly what was going on, but wanted to favor his younger son over his older son. But it was still a blindness. Another example in the prophets in the book of Judges is Samson. Samson was a Nazirite, which was considered a kind of a holy man, I guess would be the word to use. But he wasn't exactly on the up and up, and he, for one thing, had weakness for women, and also had strength that he got from his long hair. If you remember the story, and so the hair got cut off, and he was also blinded. They thought that would stop him from doing anything, and he didn't ask God for sight. He asked for God's will in all of this, and he was able to get a victory over the Philistines because he took out the main part of the tent they were all in, and at that point, and I realize we're talking about a long time ago, but he was one who was able to fulfill his destiny, if you will, despite blindness. So there's I think the bottom line is I agree with Linda. I think it's considered a spiritual thing as opposed to a practical thing that, just because you're blind, it doesn't mean you're inept or lacking. You may be lacking faith, but then you get it. And because a lot of people will come up to you, and that's the other thing, is that people will come up to you and say, well, do you want me to pray for so that you can see? And the answer is no. There are
Please,
a lot
no.
more important things to pray for.
Okay, thank you. Rebecca, you raised your hand. Did you have a question?
Yes, I just had one more question about your experience with the leaders of the faith communities, and do you have good relationship with your faith leaders, and also have you felt welcomed by them? Do you feel that they have been inclusive, not only to you, but to community with various types of conditions or situations? And how could they improve their welcoming and inclusiveness? So especially the faith leaders, that's my question.
Well, I think, I of course was, because they asked me to come 20 years ago from, Wisconsin to move here for specific reasons. And one, the principal of the church, a school, who is also our pastor's mother, had been praying for someone to teach music. And there was really nobody in the church that, really wanted to take that on. So when I came to visit, my friend, who's also blind, a month later, they moved me here. And I had no intention when I came to visit that I was going to be picking up, all my stuff and moving here in a month and teaching school. So for our church leadership, that I felt very welcomed in previous churches. So one of the reasons I left the Lutheran church was because I was directing the choir, and we had a gal who was accompanist, and we were doing it out of the goodness of our heart because we love the Lord and wanted to serve the church. And I forget who it was exactly, what they called the body of leadership there, but they decided they wanted to hire one person to play the organ and direct the choir. Well, that left both of us out of ministry opportunities. And they ended up hiring a sighted person who was from the college that I had gotten my degree from. and he wasn't a vocalist. He was an organist. And how do they direct? Well, they have to nod their head because hello, their hands are otherwise occupied. So I was a little bit unhappy with that situation. So eventually I went somewhere where I thought I could be of more use. And there again, they didn't hire me as choir director because the person in the Methodist church who was on the worship committee was tired of being the lead soprano in the choir, and she knew that I could take that role. Well, they already had a blind organist, so I started a youth choir. They didn't know if we could work together as two blind people, and I said not to worry, we figured it out. The only reason the youth choir didn't survive was because parents weren't bringing their kids there. So yeah, sometimes the leadership just plain gets in the way, and that's unfortunate, but in the situation I'm in now, they're just great.
Okay, thank you, Linda. And this kind of moves us in another direction there. We have back to the part about the image of I was once blind, but now I see. There's some other Rabbi Michael Levy points out that there are other phrases that are used, blind leading the blind, that imply that blind people aren't capable. And that those types of things need to be dealt with as well. Not his exact words, but he also says with Rebecca's question about people reading from the Torah. She says most sighted people don't read from the Torah. They are perfectly happy to let a designated person read from the Torah. The more important question is, we who are blind, visually impaired, want the same access to Torah text and commentaries as sight people do. One other thing we can't get away from and shouldn't, all people with disabilities need to show their houses of worship how to plan ahead. The minute Yom Kippur is over, we blind Jews need to approach our synagogues about Chanukah programs. Muslims need to approach about Ramadan. And then his final comment, faith leaders, the highest level should develop and implement a disability platform requiring accommodation, not just saying it's an act of charity. Of course, if you don't have money, you can't totally accommodate. Those are some great insights there, Rabbi Michael, and appreciate those contributions. One other question that Karen Moritz posted. She says, I am a blind Presbyterian minister, and I think there are two foundational issues we haven't discussed. What are the basic attitudes toward the blind in our various faith traditions and in our holy writings? We've touched on it, but we haven't talked about the blind in leadership as clergy. This has been a great beginning to this congregation. I hope we can do more of this. I'm aware that we have some rabbis in attendance that are in leadership positions. Michael, you and Habib and Linda are in leadership positions as well. Any comment about that?
Oh, I'll comment again. Hi, Karen. I know who Karen is. And there are, one of the reasons we started the Blind Christians, division, and then the Blind Christians group, or the Communities of Faith division and the Blind Christians group, was to help those who wanted to be deacons in their churches or pastors. And we do have a number of pastors in the group right now who are actually on our group list. And, we just want to encourage them and help them. So far, none of them have said, I'm having trouble with this, that, or the other thing. So I think encouraging Christian people or people of other faiths to be in leadership is a great idea. There's nothing in the Bible, there's nothing in any not reports, but I'm doing a word search and I'm not coming up with it. Anyway, documentation anywhere that says that blind or low vision people cannot be clergy or cannot be. It's, we believe that if God calls you to that, that's what you should do. And so that's, and Karen's been a pastor for many years. And so, and we've had people talk at our meetings at national conventions about their experiences and how some people have had trouble becoming a deacon or have had trouble serving communion or, or that being an elder or whatever, just because people won't let them be a part of that ministry. And that, we're out to change that. So thank you, Karen, for bringing that up.
I want to respond to the question about the Bible. The thing is that we're dealing in a lot different times. There was a time
Yes.
when being blind was very different in the attitude, and a lot of that gets reflected in the Bible in terms of its time and what it means. So a lot of it is time oriented. And the other thing, I know in terms of Jewish tradition, there isn't anything that has stopped people from being rabbis. I know two of the rabbis on this list, and they're both blind, or two of the rabbis on this list are blind, and are very active. In the National Federation of Blind in Virginia, we have a minister that's a pastor in a small town in Virginia, and he's been a pastor for a number of years. And so we again, the NFB wants to support people in taking on those roles, and we want to encourage others to take on roles of leadership or participation in whatever congregation or faith group they're in.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. We are about at the end of our time here. I want to thank Stuart and Habiba and Linda for all of your contributions, and Rebecca for moderating for us. We have come in contact with so many different resources through this process of planning this webinar, and have been made aware of others who are interested in making contributions and working together. So we will, there's going to be work, there'll be some work that will be done after this, and in an interfaith approach, and also working with organizations like the National Federation of the Blind, and doing some interfaith activities. There is a possibility with the great leadership that is on this call that we can put together another webinar and hear from others in the field of faith and disability. And so I think that this has been a very fruitful conversation. I appreciate everybody who's attended, and the help that we've received from others, National Federation for the Blind, Musson, and then Rabbi Michael Levy has been a great help. So thank you to all of you for your contributions to this conversation. And it will continue, I will promise you that. We will sign off, and we'll send everybody a copy of the recording here, and all people who registered. So you can look forward to that in the next week or so. But thank you again, and we look forward to having more interfaith conversations with all of you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you for the
Appreciate it.
opportunity. Thank you.
You're so welcome. May God bless you in all of your endeavors.
Amen. You too.
You too. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.